I'm Athanasios Platias from the University of Piraeus and coordinator of the Mackinder Forum from Europe. And I'm delighted to introduce a close colleague of mine, Ioannis Kotoulas. Ioannis in English means John, so John Kotoulas. He is a very rare researcher because he's one of the very few persons that I know that he holds two PhDs. One PhD in history and one PhD in geopolitics. He is teaching as a lecturer at the University of Athens. He's teaching geopolitics there, and he has lectured extensively in many countries, too many to record, but I will quote Georgia and the Caucasus, Germany, China. He is a prolific writer. We had the chance to listen to his latest book on Ukraine, something like a year ago. So he gave a fascinating talk on the war on Ukraine. And now we are cooperating in a project trying to look at the origins of geopolitical thinking. So we look at writers like Thucydides, Herodotus. So what John is going to present today is really Herodotus as one of the fathers of geopolitical thinking. So, John, Yannis, we are really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Professor Platias. Good afternoon, everyone from Athens, Greece. So today we'll be talking about Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian and geographer, and we will be talking also about Iran too. So Iran is in the news again, this time in the ancient times. So the title is Geopolitics in Herodotus, a class of empires and civilizations. You can see Herodotus on the right, and on the left is the King Xerxes of the Persian Empire. So Herodotus has been called the father of history by the Roman orator Cicero. He is actually the first historian in ancient Greece that creates a kind of concrete work. He lays the foundation for history, for ethnography, and for culture studies. He had some predecessors of the Ionian school, like Hecateus of Miletus, Xanthus of Lydia, and so on. But what he does is, for the first time, he creates a work of epic proportions. So his book called Histories, which in ancient Greek means narrative, is divided into 9 books. This division is not by himself, not by Herodotus, but by the philologists in Alexandria, in Egypt, during the Hellenistic age. So what is Herodotus actually talking about? The subject of his histories is how Greece fought the Persian Empire during the Persian Wars. You can see in the early 5th century BC, and why did Greece win this war, which was essential not just for the survival of Greek culture and the political system of Greece, but also for the West, for the rise of the West. So Herodotus is living in a time of Pax Persica, of Persian peace. He was actually born in the Persian Empire, in the sense that his native city, Halikarnassus, modern-day Bodrum in modern Turkey, was back then under Persian rule. So let's see some unique elements in Herodotus. He has the first model, of course, not a complete theoretical framework, but a preliminary concept of the rise and fall of empires. How and why do empires rise and how they fall? He has the first notion of a class of civilizations. This is Europe versus Asia. He has the first concrete definition of what is a nation. And his definition, common descent, common language, common religion, and common culture, is very close to the German school, the German Romantic school of Herder, not the French model, which is the constitutional order, but the German Romantic school, which laid emphasis on all these, let's say, cultural aspects. He has the first use, in Herodotus' work, one can find the first use of the term Atlantic Ocean, the first mention of using maps for strategic reasons, and interestingly enough, the first mention of an empire where the sun does not set. We know this, of course, in connection with the Spanish and the British empires. This can be found also in Herodotus, referring to the Persian Empire. That was the ambition of the Persians, as we shall see. So, some biographical data. He was born in Halicarnassus, which was then under Persian rule. He was a member of the local aristocracy. This family was of mixed Greek and Carian ancestry. We can know that from the name of his father and his relatives. As an aristocrat, he received military training, especially aristocrats in ancient times would receive military training in horses, and so he was knowledgeable in things related to war. He took part in a revolt against the tyrant of the city, Lygdamis. There were two revolts. The second one was successful, so they overthrew this tyrant. And for a period, he was exiled in a nearby island, Samos. Then he went to Athens. He lived in Athens for a period. So this is during the golden age of classical Greece, during the age of Pericles, the glory of Athens. Later, he was part of a mission of settlers, Athenian settlers, in Thurii. This is a city in modern-day Calabria, South Italy, colony. And he died sometime after the start of the Peloponnesian War. So we don't know exactly, but it's definitely, he saw the start of the Peloponnesian War. He may have died in Athens, some say during the plague, or another theory puts him in Thurii back, that he went back to Italy, or that he was in the court of, in the kingdom of Macedonia. He traveled extensively in the Persian Empire and beyond. His native city, Halicarnassus, was a famous city, very dynamic with merchants, trade. So they traveled, seamen traveling to Egypt and beyond. So he had these networks already. But he also, let's say, used the Pax Persica, the Persian peace, to travel inside the Persian Empire. So he definitely went to Egypt. He may have gone also to Libya. He went to Tyre in Phoenicia, modern-day Lebanon. He went to Babylon, following the Euphrates, and he went also to Ukraine, to Scythia. So what is Herodotus talking about? He's talking about the rise and expansion of the Persian Empire, of its clash with the Greek world, and how and why does this expansion of this imperial model, the Persian model, how does it find its limits, let's say? We shall see there are some case studies that Herodotus mentions. There is a theory that his work is like a kind of a warning to Athens to not fall into the trap of strategic overextension, like the Persians did. Of course, this is just a theory among the, analysts in philology, but it's very interesting because his audience were not the Persians, were the Greeks. So his book was directed at Greeks. He has a different style than Thucydides. He's more archaic, let's say. He's not so 100% rational like Thucydides. He likes to tell tales that are a bit, have this fantastic element. He likes all these stories about wild beasts or strange occurrences and so on. He likes this Oriental, let's say, stories, the folklore. He is based on the oral culture of Greece, and he based his work on Homer. So he wanted to do something like Homer. So this is like how the ancient Greeks would view the world. Of course, they had knowledge. This is what the world is like in the work of Herodotus. That does not mean that, for example, the ancient Greeks or Herodotus did not know of the existence of England, as you can see, but it means that what are the nations that are mentioned in his work. And you can see that we will be talking about, for example, to the right of the map, the Massagetes, an Iranian tribe against whom the Persians campaigned. We'll be talking about the Ethiopians, which actually means in ancient Greek dark-skinned. It's not the modern, so much the modern day Ethiopians. In ancient Greece, that would be the Nubians. I will talk later about that. And the Scythians, where is modern Ukraine, and of course the Greeks in the center. So that was, let's say, the idea of the world in Herodotus' time. You can see up to the Hyperboreans to the far east. My theory is that the Hyperboreans, I don't know, Professor Platias, if you agree, may have been the Chinese, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, let's move on. So, in Herodotus' work, there is this sense of Asia versus Europe. This is not in a, let's say, ideological sense, you know, good Europe, bad Asia. This element does not exist in Herodotus, but there exists some unique characteristics of Asia and Europe. And Europe, actually, you have to think this as Greece, because back then Europe is like Greece, and the Roman Republic is still weak. It had just evicted the overlordship of the Etruscans. So, in Herodotus' thinking, Asia, which is, you know, exotic and interesting, he likes to recount all these strange customs of you find in Asia. It can become dangerous for the Greeks when it is united on a political level. And what is wrong in Herodotus, according to Herodotus? You should not overcome borders. This notion of borders is essential in the ancient world. Ancient Greeks and other nations believed that you have to respect the natural order. That means do not cross the sacred borders or what they considered even natural and cultural borders. So in Herodotus' perception, the Persians should stick to Asia and do not cross into Europe, because this is hybris. And hybris inevitably leads to nemesis and thesis, to punishment. The first time the Asian part is united politically was by the kingdom of Lydia with King Croesus, this very rich guy. He was the first ruler who was ambitious. He wanted to expand to the Greek islands. There is this very interesting phrase in Greek in Herodotus. It says that Croesus had this desire for land, imeros gis, but this means also strong desire. So this means conquest, to take fertile land, but also, you know, strategic lands. Lydia was expansive, but it also functions in a sort of being a buffer state with the Persians. So when Lydia was extinguished by the Persians, the Persian Empire had no frontiers with the Greeks. Now it was the turn of the Greeks. Now look at this very different perception of geopolitics and how did ancient Greeks and Persians saw the sea. The Greeks used many names for the sea. This is from Homer, of course. This wine dark sea, this is an expression by Homer. But when you have all these adjectives about the color of the sea, you know, like the Eskimos have so many names for snow and ice, this means that you are very acquainted with the sea. While the Persians call the sea bitter water. These are land people who have no experience of the sea, who actually find it dangerous. So the Persians were not good at the sea. So this is why they employed the Phoenicians, who were very good in maritime aspects, and also Greeks from Ionia. So for the Persians, the sea is like a hostile environment. So this is the unification of West Asia, Asia Minor under Lydia. The first time that there seems to be a threat for the Greek world, but not so much, not so strong. Croesus wanted to expand in the Aegean, and but he was defeated by the Persians. And you know this, he received like an, how you call this in English, an omen by the oracle. The oracle said, do not cross a river, because if you cross this river, you will destroy a king. No, it said, do not cross a river. If you cross this river, the river is Alice, that you see in the center of the map, where the frontiers are to the east. If you cross this river, you will destroy a kingdom. And Croesus thought, okay, I will destroy the Persians. He interpreted it this way, but he actually destroyed his own kingdom. He attacked the Persians. So by destroying Lydia, the Persians reached the Aegean. Herodotus' text is not just some random, text. There is a plan in his text. How do we know this? Because his book begins and ends with references to the distinction between Europe and Asia. So he had organized this. This means he finished his book, and that he has a concrete plan on how to organize this. So the whole subject is to describe this Asian world united under the Persian administration that attacks Greece. So he spends like 2/3 of his histories describing Asia under the Persian Empire, and then he goes on to the Persian Wars. So all this description of Asia, of this multi-ethnic imperial polity, is actually like a foreword to his main subject, which is the Persian Wars. So Themistocles, the person who created, the politician who created the naval might of Athens, he would view Greek victory in the Persian Wars as a sort of verification of divine order. It means that Asiatic Persians should stay in Asia and Greeks should stay in Europe. This is like a preliminary concept of spheres of influence. When the Persians invade, and these are some interesting concepts in Herodotus about his sense of geography and how he views the territorial relief, there is this description, Yi polemi tide ti katistate. This is an advice by an exiled Spartan king to the Persians. It says, if you invade Greece, the Greek land itself will become your enemy. That means geography is not to your advantage. The Greeks know their land, they can use it. It's a mountainous area. You're not used in fighting there. It's a maritime area. The Greeks will use all these passageways, these choke points to inflict defeat. And this did indeed happen. So this expansionism is dominant in Herodotus. He considers Asia to be a force, an imperial force that has this expansionist drive. He devotes a large part of his book, 40 paragraphs in the 7th book, to describe all the nations that compose the Persian army. So this is also an ethnographic description of the Persian Empire, but he also wants to show all this union under the Persians. So the Greeks had this security problem with the Persians. The Persian Empire at their doorstep constantly want to control the Aegean, which was the heart of the Greek world. And, Alexander the Great, typically for his character, came up with a radical solution. I will totally destroy the Persian Empire, no balance, and some planets. That would be also another interesting topic, geopolitics of Alexander the Great. But he was also influenced by the Persians because he copied their imperial idea. So, as I mentioned before, this crossing of borders of the natural order for ancient Greeks would be sort of hybrids. You should not do that. But this may sound theological, but it reflects geopolitical realities, and it reflects all this geophysical fragmentation of Greece. The Greek world had over more than 1,000 states. So each city was a state. This is a very unique characteristic of the Greek world. There were more than 1,000 cities in mainland Greece, what is today, in Ionia, modern Western Turkey, in the Black Sea, in the in the Western Mediterranean, in South Italy, in Sicily, up to France. So everywhere there were Greek cities, more than 1,000 of them. This was the Greek world. So there is this interesting correlation between ideals of world domination, of imperial ideas, and with the geophysical characteristics of Asia. So it's not, I think it's not an accident that major Asian civilizations have this ideal of world domination. The Chinese had it as Tianxia, or kingdom under the skies. The Mongols had it. The Turks had it when they expanded. Ancient Persia had it, and we shall see they had this religious aspect of, ancient Persians were Zoroastrian, a religion that still survives today in Persia, but mostly in India. This religion is very interesting because it was the first to introduce this very strong dualist element that you later find in Christianity too. And this notion of the good versus the bad, Zoroastrianism influenced very much even Judaism with the belief in angels. These are considered to be Zoroastrian religious influences, or even hell. So it was a very interesting religion that was used also to justify the imperialist expansion of Persia. Now, Greece, on the other hand, is a European culture that is based on city-states, on citizens fighting for their city. So the Greeks had this phalanx. Phalanx is this formation that you see here in an ancient vase. Here you have Greeks fighting between themselves, of course, and you can see this very close-knit formation that you have to cover for the guy standing right next to you with your shield. If you do not do that, you both will die. So the actual birthplace of democracy, equality before death, is the phalanx. So this is when you have men fighting on the battlefield and facing the same odds, then you can have the quest for, for equal rights. Here you do not have so much cavalry, you do not have this Trojan War battles where you have aristocrats fighting individual battles. Here is collective groups fighting very fiercely against each other. So let's see some concepts in Herodotus. The class of civilizations. Of course, this is by Samuel Huntington. And of course, this is an analogy because Herodotus does not actually have an identical perception. He has a preliminary concept of a class of civilizations, but let's see some stuff here. You have the ethnically homogeneous Greece. Greece was in Greece only Greeks lived, so you have an area which is homogeneous in terms of culture, ethnic identity, language, religion, and so on. This is very interesting. While in Asia, many nations, different nations lived. So Greeks typically would distinguish war when they fought between themselves. They would often call this stasis, while when they fought the non-Greeks, which they called barbarians, they would call this polemos. This distinction you can find in the work of Plato. So they had this concept, okay, we fight between ourselves. We may use the Persians as an offshore balancer for when Athens fights Sparta, Sparta allies with, makes an alliance with the Persian Empire during the Peloponnesian War. But this does not mean that they accept the Persians as part of their, of the legitimate, let's say, world. It's a similar way how the Europeans saw the Ottoman Empire as an external force, but not as part of the club, let's say. So Herodotus has this concept of a class of civilizations, but he does not view Persians like in a diminutive manner. He does not consider the Persians to be less in comparison to Greeks. The Greeks admired the Persians, and Herodotus especially admired the Persians for their effective imperial system. He admired their technical works, but he also finds, their customs a bit alien, not suitable to Greece. This is why he describes them so thoroughly. There is this sense of otherness, let's say, between the Greek world and the Persian world, but this does not translate into a sense of superiority. But gradually, it is true that the Greeks, and especially after their victory of their Persians, gained a lot of more confidence, and they gradually saw the Persians as weaker, not worthy rivals. There is a sense of growing cultural nationalism in ancient Greece after the victory over the Persians. And later, during the Roman Empire, when the Greeks were subject to the Romans, they tried to maintain their identity. So they had this very strong cultural identity. So it's interesting that one ancient Greek writer living during the Roman times, Plutarch, who wrote many biographies, he considers Herodotus to be a friend of the barbarians. He wrote a short essay accusing Herodotus of being too friendly to the barbarians, to the non-Greeks. Why? Because Plutarch was living in a time when Greeks, having no political power, being under the Romans, had to establish their cultural power. So he wants Greeks to distinguish from anything from the East. It's interesting. This notion that I have at the end, interpretatio Graeca, this means that the ancient Greeks would interpret other gods when they found in Persia or Phoenicia. They would say, oh, that's Greek. So that means that's Hercules. They would say that Melkart, a Phoenician deity, it's actually Hercules. What does this mean? That there was no distinction, no clear, there was no oppositional mindset. There was a sort of inclusive religious aspect on the part of the Greeks. So Herodotus has this very interesting definition of what constitutes a nation. Nation in the term, not sometimes in English, nation gets confused with state. Nation like a population that has, characteristics. And his definition is very interesting. And it is based on common descent, omemon, common blood, he says, homoglosson, common speech, common language, and homotropon, common customs, common culture, and also common religion. So this is what the Athenians respond when the issue of whether they will fight to defend Greece is posed. Of course, we will do that because we are part of the Greek nation. And this is very interesting because we are talking about the 5th century BC. So the Greeks had a very strong political identity, which means that they would fight fiercely for their city-state, but they also knew that they were one nation. But they were very fierce in defending their city. Meaning back then, the political meaning in their life would come from their participation in the city. Remember Socrates, the ancient philosopher, he died. He refused to disobey the laws of his city. When his pupil said, okay, let's get you out of the city to escape the death sentence, he said, no, I have to obey the laws of my city. This was very strong in ancient Greece. So this unity of the Greek world is also proven by the fact that the Greeks sent a mission to Sicily, to the tyrant Gelon. He was the tyrant of Syracuse, the strongest city in Sicily, asking for help against the Persians. So you have Greeks all over the world, all over the known world of there, trying to coordinate against the Persians. And it is interesting that it seems that there was some sort of coordination between the Persians and the Carthaginians, who are Phoenician, of course, in origin. Of course, this cannot be proven 100%, but the fact that the Carthaginians attacked at the same period against the Greeks in Sicily means that the Greeks of Sicily could not dispatch any help to the Greeks in mainland Greece, and it is interesting. So, in Herodotus, the second theme is political autonomy versus Asiatic despotism. The Greek ideal of political autonomy, which was very fierce. Greeks would not like to unite, even when they fought the Persians. They did this in the last minute, the last moment, not everybody joined in, and it was later dissolved. They did not like to be subdued under a hegemon. The force that united the Greeks, pretty much like Prussia later united the Germans, was the Greeks of Macedonia, Philip and then Alexander the Great. He united the Greeks, and then came the attack of the united Greek world on Asia, on Persia, under Alexander the Great. So Herodotus has this interesting concept that virtue, arete, which the etymology of this in Greek is related to masculinity, military prowess and ability, is related to poverty. If you're poor, you're brave, you have the virtues of an honest, poor soldier, let's say. But if you become rich, you may become, a bit sort of decadent, prone to luxuries, not so much to war. The ancient Greek concept of liberty is different than the modern. For Greeks, for ancient Greece, liberty is submitted to the will of the political community, not so much individual rights. So it is interesting that Herodotus, the final paragraph in Herodotus' work, and again, this is no coincidence, is Persians talking between themselves. It's kind of a flashback before the rise of the Persian Empire. It's Cyrus, and there is this discussion between Cyrus and his advisors. And Cyrus says that if we expand from warlike mountainous people, we go to the flatlands, we will lose our fighting spirit. So Herodotus believes that the Persians actually, through their expansion, lost the qualities that had made them great. So here you can see also the suspicious aspect of Greeks, how the Persians saw the Greeks. This about their open style, the market economy, and their open democratic and style of governance. He does not trust them. He thinks that Greeks cheat each other in the agora, where they come to trade and speak. And another speech by Demaratus. He was an advisor to the Persians. He was Greek. He's talking about the Spartans, and he says they are free, but they're not free, completely, because they obey to law. So here you have a rule of law meaning not only legislation, but also custom, cultural custom. So it's both. So, and he uses this word, the spotis, master, which in ancient Greek has negative connotation, but it means that they have to obey the law at any case. Next slide. And this is how we understand, this is the epigram on the grave of the 300 Spartans that fought along Leonidas in Thermopylae against the Persians. So this is very touching. Oxin αγέλην Lacedaemoniis, ότι τι δεκίμεθα της σκήνων ρήμας υπηθόμενοι. O stranger, you who come by this monument, go tell the Spartans that here we lie, having obeyed their laws. So this is very essential in Greece. And this was the power, I think, the intensive power, I call it, of Greece. This discipline, political discipline that allowed them to not, break ranks during the Persian attack. Next slide, please. So the Persians were an expansive empire. They had a plan to conquer all of Europe. Herodotus says that the Persian plan was not just, like a raid on Greece, like a limited war. They wanted to conquer all of Europe and all the known world. So they had this ideal of global domination. And Greece, of course, was the most important area back then of Europe, the most developed. So if Greece had fallen, then the rest of Europe would probably follow, and the history of the Western world would be totally different. So we have this contradiction between the Persian expansive power, control of space, numerical superiority, but the Greek intensive power, which is their homogeneous aspect. They were better soldiers. The Greeks were the best soldiers in antiquity until the Romans rose, and they had this. They were. This is why they were sought out after as mercenaries. and this allowed them to defeat the Persians. Then you have Greek sea power versus Persian land power. Remember that the Persians were not so acquainted with the sea. They employed Phoenicians and Ionian Greeks to fight, even during these fights against the Greeks in the Persian Wars. The Greeks used the geography of Greece. Greece is a very mountainous, rugged country. The valleys are very small. There are a lot of land choke points and passageways that you have to control. And it has a very fragmented, indentured coastline. Greece, although it's a small country, on the map, it has a great coastline, one of the largest in the world. Because it's so indentured, it's actually something like 15,000 miles if you stretch it. So this is very interesting, and it also explains why Greeks were and still are among the best seamen in the world. So Greeks used geography to their advantage to inflict a decisive defeat on the Persians. So this is the Persian Empire. You can see stretching from Central Asia, what is now Kazakhstan, to India, to modern-day Iraq, to Egypt. They controlled Egypt, up to the limits of modern Sudan. They tried to invade modern Sudan, but they failed. They controlled eastern Libya. They tried to expand to Carthage, modern Tunisia and Algeria, but the Phoenicians, interestingly enough, said no, because these are our brothers, so we will not fight. They controlled the Caucasus region, modern Syria, modern Israel, Turkey, and a part of Europe. And they wanted to expand further into Greece, into Ukraine, and they failed, as we shall see. So this was a vast empire. Here we are talking again about Iran, always in the news. It was the first Eurasian empire. So later you had a revival of the Persian Empire with the Romans. Again, later you had the Ottoman Empire and the Mongol Empire. But the Persian is the archetype, let's say. It included the countries of all nations, according to this Persian expression. There is this interesting hypothesis by Karl Wittfogel, as you know, about the hydraulic civilizations that are prone to despotism because you need a lot of workforce and therefore you need control by central authority. This is Mesopotamia, Indus, Egypt, or China. And they had an ideology of global conquest dressed in a religious manner. God wants that we control the whole world, Theos outo agi, or we need to control, we need to that all men become our servants. The Zoroastrian religion had some elements of this strong dualism. The Persians thought that the crossing of Hellespont in near modern Istanbul would be like, a cosmological event, that it happened supposedly 7,000 years after Zoroaster's birth. So this is the time to invade Europe. There was this sense that we are fulfilling some destiny. Persia was the Asian enemy of European powers for more than 1,000 years, first of the Greeks and then of the Romans, as Parthians, and then as the Sassanid Empire, until the conquest by the Arabs. So it was the most decisive factor, let's say, in the ancient world. The Persian model of the universal empire influenced Alexander the Great. The Greeks had no concept of empire until then. They actually took that from the Persians, and let's say the traditional Greeks did not like that Alexander the Great would create an empire, and later the Roman Empire also copied aspects of the Persians, like the royal railroad system. Emperor Diocletian introduced reforms to make the state look like the Persian, because in order to antagonize your enemy, sometimes you adopt some elements of the enemy. So he introduced heavy cavalry, which the Persians had, and there is a sense of new unity under Christianism. The Roman state evolves into something, let's say, more concentrated to fight its enemy. So a brief comment on today. Iran is not Venezuela to assume that Iran, which is an ancient power core there, for thousands of years would fall along like Venezuela. I think this was a wrong assumption. Iran controlled the same highlands there for thousands of years. So, interesting fact, the Royal Road, this is a description in Herodotus. This was the artery, the main communications artery of the Persian Empire. And there's this building in New York City. I found that they have this this inscription about the United States Postal Service. This is actually from Herodotus. So this is a rephrasing of Herodotus' work, that neither snow nor rain, will stop this heroic postman. So the Persians would also use Greeks to make explorations, and they would have technical works like the Suez Canal, first version of the Suez Canal, to unite their territory. So here now we shall see how the Persians expanded. So they expand from the highland core of Persia, the Iranian plateau, and they try to control rich areas with natural resources, economic corridors. First, they control the Medians. The Medians are Iranians too. So these two Iranian tribes unite, and the Medians were put on equal holding in the Persian Empire. Then they conquer Lydia, as we saw. So they control the high plateaus of Anatolia, and they have access to the Black Sea and to the Aegean Sea. Then they control Mesopotamia, the very rich. This Mesopotamia, Babylon, was the economic center of the ancient world for over 2,000 years, or more like 3,000 years. The economic center of Eurasia, of the part except China, was Mesopotamia. This changed when the economic center gradually shifted to the Mediterranean, Alexandria, then to Rome, and ever more to the west. So they control Mesopotamia. What do they gain? They gain bureaucratic expertise. They gain very fertile and flatlands. Then they conquer Phoenicia, which has this expertise in the sea, and they use the Phoenicians, as we saw, to attack Greece. And Tyre was the economic center in the Mediterranean until it was destroyed, and this was not an accident, by Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great knowingly destroyed Tyre so that he would build later Alexandria and take the center from Asia to a new project. They conquer Egypt, which was a very fertile land, grain in ancient times, which was like the oil of antiquity, would come from Egypt or Scythia, Ukraine. These were the two main sources, and Carthage. So in Carthage, the Persians fail because the Phoenicians do not take part in the campaign. They will not fight against their brethren, and it meets limits in the next cases. So in Central Asia, the Persians make a campaign against the Massagete. Massagete were actually Iranian tribe, like the Scythians. Scythians and Massagete are Iranian. They speak Iranian language, but they are not, of course, they are semi-nomadic people. Massagete means in Iranian fish eaters. So this tribe would control the steppes east of the Caspian Sea, modern-day Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. Cyrus crosses the river. He is defeated and killed by Queen Tomiris. Very, very interesting. What do the Persians try to do? They use, the tactics of agricultural populations. They use wine against the nomads. The nomads did not have wine, so they get very easily intoxicated. Something like what the French and the English did with the Amerindians. So they could not control, themselves. So, and Herodotus describes how they become drunk and slaughtered by the Persians. And later, of course, Queen Tomiris takes her revenge. What does she do? She decapitates Cyrus and puts his head inside wine. You can drink as much as you want now for corrupting our people. So you have the Persians fighting against nomads. This is the first fight of the Persians against a nomadic, very mobile population. So they cannot defeat them because there is nothing to conquer there. But, and this is, let's say, the limit of their expansion in Central Asia. Later, they try King Cambyses conquers Egypt, and he has these plans. Okay, let's move southwards. Let's conquer the known world. And he wants to conquer the so-called Ethiopies, which is the Kushite kingdom, actually, Nubia, modern-day Sudan. So he reaches, in the map, you can see he reaches probably the area of Abu Simbel, number 2 in the map. But because he has this strategic overextension, the dry climate, the inadequate supply lines, his expeditionary force gets disbanded. There are incidents of they eat all their animals, all their donkeys and all their horses, and they even draw lots so that they eat one of their soldiers. So you have incidents of cannibalism because there was no food to get there. So this is the lesson, let's say, from Herodotus. Strategic overextension can lead to disaster. It's interesting that the Persians had this garrison in the Elephantine Island. This is in the first cataract, where is today Lake Nasser. And the garrison there was composed of Jewish soldiers who were subjects of the Persian Empire. There are a lot of the, inscriptions there. There was a Jewish community in Persian service. So this is the campaign against the Scythians. As you can see, they go from Thrace, and there is a coordination of the fleet up to the Danube, and then they invade the land of the Scythians. But here they face the same problem that Napoleon faced when he invaded Russia, or even when the Germans invaded the Soviet Union. Vast expanses, you move, and where is the enemy? So the Scythians employed scorched earth tactics. They burned the crops. They avoided battle. They would fight. They would make, surprise attacks with mounted archers, and the Persians had to leave. So this is a defeat. Let's see now, why did the Persians want to control Scythia? First of all, remember the Massagetae. The Massagetae are Iranians. Probably in the mind of Persians, they thought that they would control all this northern hinterland of the Persian Empire, stretching from Ukraine to Kazakhstan, that was composed by Iranian-speaking populations. Scythians, Massagetae, these were all related. Another possible interpretation is that they wanted to control the grain supplies towards Greece before their attack on Greece. They had already planned that they would attack Greece. This was part of their global domination. So if they control the grain flow, they could probably extort the Greeks into defeat. Remember that Athens in the Peloponnesian War had to surrender when the Spartans controlled the flow of grain with their victory in Mesopotamia. So this was very essential, all these bloodlines, economic bloodlines of antiquity. So the Scythians turned the expanses and their nomadic way of life into a strategic advantage, and they actually won, in a sense. So now we come to the attack on Greece. Here is you can see the attacks on Greece. First, they came to Marathon. Marathon is in Attica, near Athens, where they were defeated. And then they invade again, and there was the various battles in Thermopylae, Salamis, and then in Platea, the decisive land battle, and of course a naval battle in Mycale, near in Asia Minor. You can see Halikarnassus on the native city of Herodotus on the top, on the right, it's on the right side. So why did the Persians attack Greece? Mardonius, one of the generals, mentions revenge. Why? Because the Greeks supported the Ionian Revolution. The Greeks of Ionia had revolted against Persian rule, and Athens and Eretria had supported that revolution. Later, another reason, fertile lands of Europe. Xerxes mentions revenge again and conquest of Europe because he wants to control the western ends of the world. But the real problem is the security dilemma, and it is very interesting that there is this notion of security dilemma in Herodotus. Look at this excerpt from Herodotus. It says that if we do not control both sides of the Aegean, the Greeks in the future will attack us. So we have to eradicate this problem once and for all. And in a sense, the Persians were right, because when the Greeks managed to unite, they were able under Alexander the Great to totally destroy the Persians. And you have, of course, the March of the 10,000 under Xenophon. The Greeks were the best mercenaries, and this is when the Greeks understood that the Persian Empire was ripe for the taking, because these soldiers, they walked all through West Asia. So all these decisive battles that we know, Marathon, this is where Aeschylus, the famous poet, fought there. Thermopylae with Leonidas, 300 Spartans, Artemision, a naval battle, Salamis with Themistocles, and so on. There was a battle, according to Herodotus, on same day in Sicily, fought between Carthaginians with 300,000 men against the Greeks of Sicily. So this shows probably some coordination between Carthage and the Persians. And Alexander the Great certainly thought so. Why? Because he said, I'm attacking you Persians because you attacked Greece, and he destroyed Tyre because the Phoenicians had taken part in the attack against Greece. But of course, these are all can be seen as, post-war justifications. So why did the Greeks won? In a nutshell, because the Greeks were based on the Western way of war, according to this very elegant definition by Victor Davis Hanson. Decisive battle on the phalanx. And because they took advantage, they used geography to their strategic advantage, the fragmented space of Greece. And because Greeks were one nation, so this was very decisive. They could have easily, say, okay, let's go with the Persians, but they did not, even at the last moment. So this is very important. And the Greek victory was very crucial because it laid the foundation for the rise of what we call the Western civilization. If Greece had fallen, then there would be no Rome too, because the allies of Persians, the Carthaginians, united with the Persians, would crush Rome. So there will be no actually European civilization as we know it. It's a very decisive defeat in the long historical durée, equal to the victory of the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire against the Arabs in the 8th century, the French victory over the Arab invasion in France in the 8th century, and the Vienna against the Ottoman Empire. So this is some of the battles fought in Greece. You can see this very indentured coastline of Greece, very typical. The Persians could not navigate in those very, close distances in Salamis. This is why they were defeated. This is an abstract from Aeschylus. He had fought at the Battle of Marathon, and he describes the Battle of Salamis here. But it's very interesting. Why? Because this is the war cry, the battle cry of the Greeks. And the battle cry is directed to all Greeks. It does not say, oh, Athenians, fight for your city. It says, sons of Greece, fight for Greece. For what? To fight for your native land, for your children, for your wives, for the graves of your fathers. So this is like a nation fight for what is holy for Greece. We come to the end. Herodotus, he traveled widely. Remember, he had been to Egypt. He had talked there with a priest. He had been to Babylon. He had been to modern-day Lebanon, Phoenicia. He had been to Scythia. So he was probably rich, he could do that. But he also, used the merchant networks. He traveled through merchants. Greeks were very dynamic in the Mediterranean and Black Sea. He offers, let's say, the first model of an imperial expansion. How did the Persian Empire rise, and why did it fail to expand? Remember, Central Asia against the Massagetae, where they faced the open expanses of the steppes. Scythia, again, logistics and steppes. North Africa, deserts. Greece, the sea, and the fact that the Greeks were very good warriors, but also that they had this very strong political identity. They were fighting for something. The Greeks were fighting for something. So, next slide, and final slide. Herodotus creates a cyclical concept of rise and fall of empires. This is, of course, a traditional way of thinking. Empires will rise, empires will fall. We can see similar aspects in Polybius, another ancient Greek writer. We can see similar aspects in Ibn Khaldun, a medieval Arab writer who says about the dynamism of the nomadic periphery. We can see Oswald Spengler, saying about the rise and fall of civilizations. Can we relate Herodotus to later thinkers? Okay. Can we relate to Heartland? Of course, not 100%, but Herodotus is talking about the pressure of a united Asia on the periphery. Greece was the periphery of the Eurasian Persian Empire. The second issue is more relevant. There is a preliminary aspect of clash of civilizations, but not, in the sense of Huntington. And there is what I would say more important is this sense of the Greeks have their own culture and their own peculiar culture. Their uniqueness helped them win the war. Something similar to the concept of Niall Ferguson talking about how the West is different from the rest. So Herodotus is not just the father of history and ethnography, but in a sense, he's also the starting point of geopolitics as well. Thank you very much.